Viktoriya Karakcheyeva, and I'm a behavioral health director here at GW Resiliency and Well-being Center. And I have an honor of being joined by Julie Wendt, who is an adjunct instructor with our Department of Clinical Research and Leadership within the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, and also nutritionist, and has a wealth of expertise on our topic. So we're very excited to bring you, I think, a perspective from both nutritional science and behavioral science on the topic. So with that, I think I'll pass it on to Julie.
Hi, thanks for having me. I've already had so much fun just working on the presentation with you, Viktoriya. So I think, nothing much more to add in terms of where I'm coming from, except that I do have 3 kids, 2 of which are girls. And so I have personal experience with many pieces of the life cycle of a woman, and so that always makes it for me a topic of great interest, because I can see I also have 1 boy, so it's just fascinating to see in my little microcosm how some of what I see in research bears out, as well as when things are coming through that give me pause. I appreciate being able to bring my whole journey into my practice, and as I serve women in the community, I think it really helps anchor the work that I do. So that would be the only thing that I would add. And I think how we have designed this is we've got a huge topic that we could have spent an hour on each part. And rather than doing that, we wanted to start the conversation on 3 areas that are very common, I guess, friction points or curiosity points for women in terms of myths that you may be hearing in the news media around nutrition, and how it applies to you as a woman versus generally the population. So we're going to start conversations, we're going to present our perspectives, and then we hope that you'll join us in a little bit of a discussion around each topic. So I think we were thinking about 20 minutes for each topic. We'll present a few slides. We'll open it up for questions, and then when our time's up on that topic, we'll try to move to the next one. So I think those are our ground rules that we wanted to just put out there so everyone's on the same page. And if, without further ado, Viktoriya, anything to add before I share?
What I want to say, since we're a small group, obviously you have, I think, more opportunities to ask questions that are of interest. Please utilize the chat. And Julie and I will alternate on our talking points. So each of us will monitor the questions and kind of, if they are appropriate to that specific section, then we will discuss them. If not, maybe we will save them to the next one or towards the end.
Great. All right, so I will work to share my screen and then get into presenter mode. All right, are we good with everybody seeing us? Okay. So I'm excited to present on this topic. As a daughter, a mother, a caretaker, it's important to me that we look at women's journey with a slightly different lens than we do a man's. So I feel that we're really just beginning to understand the impact of, I'll call it gender, our chromosomal status would be another way to describe it, but what we're calling being a woman in this context, I think we're just beginning to understand what that means in terms of medical research. A lot of the research that has come out in the past made the assumption that women and men we're going to respond similarly to interventions, and we're going to have similar pathophysiology behind disease states that we find. And that's become more and more clear that that is not necessarily the right assumption. So as this field expands to include research on different subsets of the population, we're realizing that we need to ask questions and challenge our assumptions about what our current research has told us in terms of how to care for women. So when we think about exercise science, we think about heart disease, intermittent fasting, we know that women react differently than men to interventions. And in order to really serve women in our community, we need to ask how these guidelines may be different for us. And I'm going to share with you some research on a few hot topics within the field of nutrition and how it relates to women in particular. But what I really hope you take away from our time together is that at the very core of this concept is that you are the expert on you, okay? And the work that I do with my patients, I really see myself as somebody who is partnering and helping to improve self-knowledge, self-acceptance, self-awareness, and coming from a place that allows us to be open to our own wisdom and how we can care for ourselves. So when we look at people either in our lives or in the media that are encouraging us to do certain things for our health, I want you always to come back to trying to tune in to what's right for you, trying things, and then knowing that ultimately it may or may not work that way for you, and that doesn't mean anything except it may or may not work. So one of the big topics that we chose is thinking about nutrition being guided by the life cycle phase that you're in. So we know that optimal nutrition throughout a woman's life cycle is going to be governed by various cycles, right? So the monthly cycle we have, a seasonal cycle, the diurnal cycle, day and night, your developmental cycle. So as you go from adolescent to young adult, through our fertility years and into menopause, those are all the different types of cycles that are going to call for a different consideration in terms of nutrition. So, we have an entire class at GW's integrative medicine program that I teach to providers that recognize these different life cycle phases and how nutrition needs to adjust and accommodate. And while I think we understand that, I think sometimes when I talk to women in my practice, it feels like we haven't really internalized that we are going to have different needs depending on where we are at in our life cycle. And I'm guilty of this myself, learned it the hard way. So no judgment, just calling our attention to it in a way to improve our own self-compassion and awareness around how we want to take care of ourselves now and in the future. So one thing that I came across as I was preparing for this, which I just fell in love with immediately, is this idea of bikini medicine, and this idea that what we've been taught about female health is really limited to what we cover up with a bikini for a woman. So the only differences are what's under the bikini, the reproductive organs. And Dr. Lisa Moscani is the person I heard this through. And she is a neuroscientist that is studying Alzheimer's disease in women in particular, and really bringing home the point that the brain of a woman is very different than a man. And part of why we're seeing that 2/3 of women, 2/3 of people that have Alzheimer's disease are women, it has nothing to do with their reproductive organs, but it certainly has something to do with their chromosomal pattern, and we need to start digging into that in order to serve these women well. So as we move towards recognizing that, we want to understand that the science is emerging. We have some information, we don't have it all, and that's why you're actually the best expert on this topic for yourself. All right, here we go. We're just gonna dive into the heart of the matter, which is one of the most common reasons why someone will seek the advice of a nutritionist is to understand how to lose weight. There's a lot of discussion in this space. Should we, as most doctors will say, eat less, move more? Is that sufficient? Does that work? What do we even know about that number on the scale, right? These are big questions and topics. When I look at the research, I can tell you that I can provide research that will support and pretty much any type of diet that you prefer. There will be research that supports that you can lose weight on that. And I kind of think that's good news, because it allows for our belief systems, it allows for our financial system that we have, our family structure, but it allows for us to be unique individuals and still feel like we can feed ourselves and feel healthy. But at the same time, I think there's drama in the nutrition field because people want to know what is the magic answer to this, and unfortunately there is none. There are questions like, for example, the ketogenic diet as shown to be an effective short-term weight loss tool. What we see in that is that comparing that to a low-fat Mediterranean style diet, you might lose weight more quickly in the beginning, but at the end of the day, on a longer term basis, the weight loss is similar, right? So I never promote one diet because there isn't one. And part of why there isn't one is because we need to ask questions about what are your goals for it and how does it fit in your lifestyle. Beyond this idea, so there's this calories in, calories out perspective. It's really more of an energy equation, looking at this perfect math scenario where you burn a certain amount of calories at rest, you burn a certain amount with your activity, and then depending on how many calories you consume, that is where your energy balance exists. If you're consuming less than you're burning, then you're taking energy out of storage, aka losing weight. If you're consuming more than you're burning, then you're going to be storing energy and adding numbers to the scale. That is certainly a piece of the puzzle. That is not the total puzzle. I've studied that. I've also studied and really enjoy mindful eating, intuitive eating. And that can be a really great way for people to learn about the relationship with food and to get to a place where their natural ability to moderate intake is highlighted and working well. And I know that it's not the total solution either, right? So we're really needing to consider these things and address them. And at the same time, there are certainly numerous other things that are going to play into what the number on the scale says or what your body composition ultimately is. Just off the top of my head, just talking about body composition versus the number on a scale, I prefer to talk in terms of body composition because it shows us a deeper level of health and well-being. We know from a research perspective, muscle mass, bone mass, these are all things that are important health markers, and you would not be able to discern between that and fat mass by just looking at the number on the scale. Okay, so thinking about this as a larger picture, you know, you may weigh the same amount, but if you've started weightlifting and adding muscle mass and you've decreased your fat mass, you might not know that by looking at a number on a scale. And so that's where the limitations of some of our biomarkers can really be highlighted. Nowadays, it's really great. There are some consumer-facing tools. You can go get a DEXA scan body composition report, and if you're interested in it, you know, I think you should. That will give you more details about where your health status more specifically is. So that body composition is definitely going to affect your weight. It's going to affect your base metabolic rate, and it's going to affect the rate at which you burn calories when you're working out. Your resting metabolic rate is certainly not going to be factored into this math equation of calories in, calories out, right? That equation assumes a very generic metabolic rate. For various reasons, some people may have a higher resting metabolic rate, some people may have a lower, but your resting metabolic rate is really what's going to drive most of your calorie or your energy consumption. And so that might be a reason why eating less and moving more doesn't give you the same outcomes that maybe your neighbor is getting. Your environment, what does your overall life look like, right? So you have maybe environmental toxins that you're exposed to that will certainly change your, oops, where we go? Okay, sorry about that. That will certainly change your ability to lose weight. I've seen that a lot when we're holding on to toxins. Our body is protecting us because those toxins are often stored in the adipose tissue. Your stress response, cortisol levels. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid, and it will send a message to your body to get ready for whatever stressor by importing more glucose into your bloodstream. When that happens, you have your insulin response. Insulin's job is to get that glucose from the bloodstream into your cells in order to make energy. That insulin is going to create inflammation and put you in a cycle of storing energy in adipose tissue. So high cortisol, high stress response will impact your ability to change your body composition regardless of what you're eating and how much you're moving. Sleep. Studies out there show, you know, they can contribute a 10-pound weight difference in people who are getting adequate sleep or not. Medical conditions, things to do with your thyroid, right? There's all these other reasons that calories in, calories out, and mindful eating, and put them together, you know, they're not necessarily the whole story in terms of how do we optimize our body composition. And there are definitely others. I don't know if people have thoughts on what else they've heard about or if they've experienced personally, but feel free to pop those in the chat. The list is long. So as part of this whole discussion, what's important to take away is that, yes, we need to pay attention to how much we move and the types of foods we eat. And there's lots of other reasons why it's more complicated than that. And so looking at all of these pieces for yourself, if you feel like you're in that place, can really help you actually move the needle. And really, regardless of whether or not you're losing weight given a particular diet, the ability to give your cells the cofactors, vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients that we get through our foods. That's one of the main functions of eating, right? Is to fuel our cellular machinery. Every cell is designed with the same biochemistry that requires the same cofactors. And so I love when that's part of how you choose your foods, right? Rather than a calorie count or whether or not it fits within a food restriction, like what is the nutrient density of that food and what happens to how we feel in our overall health when we choose our foods in a way that promotes our cellular health as that core foundation of our overall well-being. So I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on this, as you can tell, but that's some of what I wanted to share on this very complicated topic, which kind of leads us into a discussion around how do we even know that we want or need to lose weight, and what markers are we using in order to make that judgment. And it's really partly about body composition and knowing that piece, but your ideal body weight in my mind is a personal conversation that you want to have. And you know, I have that conversation with people often because maybe we're basing our ideal body weight on a historical phase of our lives that may or may not be relevant, right? So we want to make sure that we're staying anchored in our present, in our future, when we're deciding whether or not our health goals and targets need to include losing weight or changing that number on the scale. All right, now I'm doing, there we go.
All right, so I want to discuss that issue of ideal body weight or ideal way that we want to look from the behavioral science perspective. And again, being a woman myself, I obviously struggled with that issue through my lifetime. So our body image perception is something that I really feel plays a huge role into how we see our bodies. And I'm not sure if anyone here are into comedies, but one comes in mind, and that is I Feel Pretty. Anyone watch that? So the story is about a young woman who is overweight and really want to reach that ideal, beautiful skinny image that I think all of us got exposed to growing up. So in her pursuit, she bumped her head falling off the Peloton bicycle, and nothing had changed except all of a sudden she sees herself in a different shape and form. So her body stays exactly the same, but the way she sees herself changed. And thus it affects the way she carries herself, affects the way how confident she is in herself, affects her interactions with men, her work performance, and all other areas of her life in a dramatic way. And then at the end of the movie, she discovered nothing had changed, but that's really something within. So that's that body perception piece that to me is a hugely important, because when we look at the mirror, we see ourselves not quite as a reflection of who we truly are. We see ourselves through many, many lenses that our society, our family, our immediate surrounding, put us through. So it's about the story that you tell about yourself. And then there is effective body image, where all the stories that you tell about how you see yourself affect the way you feel about your body. And this is where the cognitive behavioral therapy piece comes into play, because from that perspective, the belief is that the way we think about our body, and that's the cognitive body image, affects the way we feel and affects the way we behave. So the diets that are actually based in a cognitive behavioral approach, like Noom, for example, tend to work with that piece that helps you to look into those negative thoughts, or maybe extreme range of black and white thinking, or overgeneralizing, or amplifying negative. So they look at it and help you to change that narrative, help you to change the negative schemata into more realistic and perhaps hopeful and positive. So, and then behavioral body image would follow. This is how you behave as a result of all three: perceptual, affective, and cognitive. And again, that movie that I quoted is a perfect example. I think there is a Measure One, Isn't It Romantic, with Rebel Wilson, that also kind of talks about similar concept. Again, nothing changes except that story you tell about yourself, that perception, which affects everything else. So with that in mind, and Julie, if we can go to the next slide, I want us to be in the mindset that the positive body image, regardless of how your body, is it truly satisfying or not, would affect a lot in terms of how you approach your health and your life in general. And all of it is really rooted deeply in self-esteem, meaning valuing yourself and believing that other people appreciate us and enjoy us for who we are, not for, how much we weigh or how our body looks. A positive attitude, and again, this is being able to recognize your strengths and not just focus on things that are not perfect, that never help, not focus on comparing and contrasting ourselves with others. And Julie made a great point that all of us are made very differently, and the way our body operates, processes certain foods, how our metabolism works, it's all very, very personal, and we need to be mindful of that. And then being critical and judgmental is not a helpful strategy at all. And then emotional stability, to me, as a person that comes from a strong kind of a integrative health background, this is something that I believe is a very important component, because the way you are maintaining connections with yourself and with the world, and how you are regulating yourself as you interact with various stressors really matters. And I'm going back to maybe a bit of a personal story. I come from a culture where looking pretty, being skinny is very, very important. It's a standard. A favorite line that was told to many, many young women when I was growing up was a quote from a French actress, Marina Vladi. And she always said, you gotta buy yourself a clothes that is a one size smaller and shoes that are one size bigger. Being at the age I am all for buying shoes one size bigger, but I am against buying clothes that is one size smaller, though it could be very motivating, because when you are uncomfortable in what you're wearing, you have a very hard time projecting that positive, relaxed, confident, emotionally stable attitude. You become too self-absorbed, you become too self-conscious, and that's not going to help. So be careful with the quotes and messages, and try to reach for that acceptance. One of my favorite women in the world, Oprah Whitney, is the one that always advocate for that, value yourself for who you are, and that imperfection that other people may judge is what makes you a true you. So I think she has a term of, there is nothing more kind of beautiful than a woman being unapologetically herself and being comfortable in a perfect imperfection. So that's the true essence of beauty for me. And if we can move to the next slide, there are some really good tips from NEDA. This is National Eating Disorders Association. And I like NEDA because I used to work with addictions, a part of my career, including eating disorders. So some of the good tips that they give here, I hope might be helpful for you as well. And we've touched upon a lot of them as I was going through previous slides. One that I really like myself is doing something nice for myself. That brings a lot of positivity, and I believe that every woman benefits from slowing down, pacing herself through her very busy day, and even if it's like, okay, I'm going to go outside for 5 minutes and just look at the sky and breathe fresh air, listen to the birds, or I'm going to, let my significant other take care of the kids and going to go that mani and petty, just so I feel good. And that translates into everything else. In your life, in your health, and that's kind of very, very important. And then another favorite one is channeling your energy not into that being sucked into the negative messages, whether they are yours, so they come from outside, and treating food as an enemy and being in a constant battle, rather than channeling this energy into things that fill you and give you positive experiences. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Julie.
I think I unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So intermittent fasting is a topic we wanted to touch on because it has fantastic research. I love it. It's a tool that fits into a lot of our busy lifestyles, and it's definitely a tool that changes whether and how you use it based on whether you're a woman or not. So most of the research that we see in this field of intermittent fasting is done on white men. And so while it may sound like, panacea of health and everyone should be doing it, it's certainly not the case. And we see this a little bit in the research, right? So we've got one study that shows intermittent fasting is not the best at decreasing the fat mass for college-aged women. We have another one that shows it is actually for women that are overweight and over 60 years old. So as we can see from a life cycle perspective, those two populations are going to be in different phases, right? We assume college-aged women are going to be in their early 20s and dealing with their full fertility cycle in terms of hormonal changes, monthly changes, versus a woman in her 60s is going to be in that postmenopausal phase where the fluctuations in the hormones are not as drastic, and that the physiology of that intervention may actually mirror more of what we are seeing in the overall studies on intermittent fasting. So this is a really great example about why people may be confused, particularly if you're a woman, whether or not you should be doing intermittent fasting. There is stuff happening in this space because it quickly became apparent that we could not apply all of the research that we're seeing about men to women and have it work out the same way. So this Dr. Mindy Pelz has a great book, Fast Like a Girl, and she's really a pioneer in the space of looking at actual cycles for women's hormones and trying to optimize fasting within that framework, rather than assuming that the entire 28 days, everything about how your body works is the same and the fasting will react the same throughout that whole month. So if fasting, but I will say, clinically, I have some women do fasting, they feel great, they lose weight, there's no complaints about it. And when I think about it, they are actually my older population. And then I have other women that are trying to do fasting. They don't feel good. They're not losing weight. And yet I have to talk them out of doing it because their neighbor did it and it worked for them. So they just assume that they're doing it wrong, rather than thinking about, okay, well, maybe this is not the best fit for my body at this time, or during this phase of my cycle. So thinking about if fasting is of interest and you've tried it and you aren't convinced it works for you, or you didn't feel great on it, you may want to look into this approach, which is really looking to phase the type of fasting that you do based on your cycle and allow your body to get the support it needs during the time that it's evolutionarily programmed to prepare for pregnancy versus not. So the one thing that I'll even point out here is that this is way more complicated than what the research shows, which is, are you doing a 15-hour fast or a 5-2 fast? It's very much more clean cut, right? Like, okay, your eating window is between X and Y, and that's what you do every day. Or you're fasting 2 days out of the 7-day week. You pick your 2 days, and on those days you have 500 calories. That's kind of the end of the story. So the level of nuance that most women need in order to make this work is much higher than what those generic intermittent fasting guidelines would be. And even still, like you see here, this summary, depending on your cycle, day 16 through 19, you can fast unless X, Y, or Z, right? So there's still caveats even within this complexity of placing yourself and your body within the right context in order for this to be a supportive intervention versus one that depletes you, drives up your cortisol, creates an insomnia pattern, all of these things that are signals that your body is not feeling that the intervention is actually helpful. So fasting is one of several different types of beneficial stressors that we can introduce into our system. The whole concept behind beneficial stress is that the system has resiliency and capacity to respond to that stressor by getting stronger, and that's why it's beneficial. But maybe in the exercise space, it makes more sense where if you're overtraining, never resting, you don't get stronger. Your muscles start to break down because they don't have enough time for repair. And that is the same here. For women, we want to think about our resiliency, our ability to respond to a stressor like intermittent fasting by getting stronger and not weaker. All
All
right.
right. So we're coming back to kind of a bit of a more psychological part of it. And diets, obviously, a temporary solution to a lifelong habit change that we are aiming for, right? That's why a lot of things that are connected with restraint or denial of food or thoughts about food never quite work because they produce that opposite effect, right? Of our brain being so deprived and our body being so deprived that it tends to overcompensate. So you lose a pound, but then you gain 3 because your body is trying to catch up. And you also put in your body in that stress situation. And Julie already talked to you about cortisol and how that pushes our body to start storing fat and instead of metabolizing more. So really loving yourself enough to live a healthy lifestyle, not a kind of a diet seesaw lifestyle, is a goal. So that leads me to a question about healthy relationship with food and what does it look like. And I have some tips that might be helpful as you're trying to figure out for yourself what it looks like. And if Julie, we can move to the next slide that has those tips. And I want to highlight a few of them. We've already established that dieting pattern, as opposed to changing your lifestyle pattern, is obviously what we are aiming for. One thing that I really want to say made a difference for me personally, and also we see it in research a lot, is building up that self-awareness and listening to your body and the cues that it gives you. And I think in our very fast-paced world, where women are torn in so many different directions, being, caretakers, being professionals, trying to look their best and meet those cultural and social standards that are imposed on us. So we stop listening to what our body is telling us because we are constantly in that fight or flight response because there is so much to do, so much to accomplish. And women are known for being excellent multitaskers. So we do it all, but then at the expense of our health. So listening to your body, aiming for more peaceful connection with food. I think I've mentioned before that looking at food as a constant enemy, because very often we feel we are in that battle with food. That is not helpful, but looking at food as serving multiple purposes, right? And again, for each of us, that purpose could differ, but finding the one that may help you to be more in peace in this relationship. When the food police calls, don't answer. And there is a reason for it. When you start being preoccupied with those shame and guilt producing thoughts that very often certain choices of food elicit in us, that may again lead to dwelling on the negative instead of aiming for that healthy balance between you and the food. Savoring the moment and listening to your body when it's satisfied is another piece to it. So not just listening to the hunger signals and cues, but also being able to savor and being mindful of when you are eating the food. And coming from the European culture, that's a drastic difference that I see because people sitting and savoring their coffee and croissant or whatever it is on their plate, and people watching and being kind of in the moment, is something that I rarely observe environment, especially in the healthcare. We all kind of try to grab and go, because there is million of other tasks that our day brings us. So that culture of savoring the food, being mindful, is kind of diminishing. And perhaps that's something that you can try to implement. Dr. Lee Frame, who is not with us today, has this beautiful exercise of eating a grape mindfully. So I encourage you to try it. Just take one grape, put it in your mouth, and take some time to savor, to engage all of your senses in really tasting that one grape and see what it does to you. All right. Again, being kind of in a scientific mode. I know a lot of people on this call are also in research or science, so bringing that scientist part of you as you approach food, as you explore your responses, as you are becoming more self-aware, is really, really crucial. And again, finding joy in taking this relationship with food beyond just food, because ultimately it's about your whole health. It's about the purpose you're applying this to. Because it's never about, I just want to look a certain way for the sake of it, right? It's maybe about, okay, I want to be a healthier mom so I can handle my 3 or 4, whatever many kids I have, right? I want to be able to play with them. I want to be able to have energy, right? So that's the purpose, right? And being in touch with that purpose is very important. And then I'm going to give it back to Julie.
All right. As predicted, we don't have a lot of time left. So I want to share this next set of slides and information with you. It sort of underscores what we've been talking about this whole time. There's a special word for what we're looking at here, which is chrononutrition. And really it's this idea of our body loves rhythm. We are governed by hormonal cycles, whether it's in the course of our monthly cycle or the daily cycle that allows us to wake up in the morning with cortisol and go to sleep with melatonin. Those are all natural hormonal cycles that govern our day. When we're aligning our diet and lifestyle with this natural rhythm, everything works better. And that's sort of the long and short of chrononutrition. And that I think with our modern environment, where we really see the impact of this evolutionarily mismatch between how our nervous system is designed, what our natural cycles are, and our modern world, which has many wonderful benefits, but definitely can be really at the root of a lot of the imbalances in our body, just from the very core of our sleep-wake cycle no longer being in alignment with what's happening in nature.
So I want to put a few fruitful thoughts here that are relevant, especially for women. And this circadian rhythm for women caretaking and work-life balance chart is actually one of my favorites, because it gives you an idea of what times of the day certain processes are happening in your body. And being attuned to those processes and maybe timing some of your interventions, not just nutritionally, but also in terms of your natural movement, your sleep and recharging, may make a huge difference. One of the surprising learnings that at least happened for me is that women actually have a shorter intrinsic circadian period comparing with the men. meaning that our biological days, it can be shorter than 24 hours. And the difference can be an average of 6 minutes per day. And though it doesn't seem a lot, if you count by days, then it actually, what it can do, it can add up, and that can accumulate maybe for almost half an hour earlier onset of melatonin secretion in women. So there was an interesting study that was done back in 2016, and they showed that women tend to fall asleep and wake up earlier than men, on average in about 2 hours. That put us practically in a different time zone, which is fascinating. So what it tells us is that if we have the circadian rhythm disrupted for whatever reason, and it could be I am a shift worker, or I travel to a different country and trying to adjust to a time zone, right? Or it could be I have a new baby, or have a grandchild and I'm taking care of them, or I'm a caretaker to someone, who is chronically ill in my family, and my biological clock, it has shifted. So that in women produces a much higher impact than in men because of this relatively small but important shift of 6 minutes. It also affects our menstrual function and our reproductive function, our mental health. So being attuned to that circadian rhythm is extremely important. And I know it brings us to the whole different conversation about what if I can't because I work shifts, or again, I'm a caretaker and my circumstances are different. That's a whole different lecture, and Julie and I might go that direction for future talks. But just important information for us as women to be especially attuned to. And back to you, Julie.
Well, we've got 6 minutes to spare, and hopefully we've triggered some ideas, some new awareness with our discussion today. I mean, ultimately, it's very, I love being a woman. I think there's so much to the journey that is special for us, and so many challenges. And it's really nice to come together to work with Viktoriya and just really call attention and awareness, and create some space for everyone to think through what it means for you to take care of yourself in this time and in this moment, and what your goals are, what matters to you, and just know that it may be very different than what your partner is doing, or some influencer on the social media is promoting, and that's okay.
If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Pratima. I don't know. I don't think we have the time for my question. It's a sort of longish one, but bottom line is I'm 66 years old. I've generally been pretty healthy, eat reasonably well, physically active and everything. I'm not on any medications so far, but this year I have had a couple of developments that one was in January of this year, I was told that my cholesterol has jumped up about 40 points. And so I started, exercising, doing some, more exercise, and, maybe a little more intermittent fasting and things like that. And then a couple of months later, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis. So I kind of have this conflict between trying to raise my dairy consumption, because of the osteoporosis. I'm trying to eat more dairy, but then I'm concerned about the cholesterol. So that's sort of, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yes. So that's very common to have happen. in menopause is to have your cholesterol go up. There is estrogen is fascinating, amazing. And there's a direct reason why when estrogen starts to decline, that the impact that it has. So the research around cholesterol coming from your diet and how it impacts your lipid studies, your serum cholesterol numbers, has been thoroughly, I guess, disconnected, so that even the American Heart Association is listing cholesterol through the diet is no longer a nutrient of concern. So it's something that the nutrition world has known for decades. Just knowing how the liver produces the majority of the cholesterol that ends up in your bloodstream. So thinking about cholesterol through dietary sources, you need to worry less about that. There is a subset of the population that is sensitive to saturated fat intake because of some of the genomic SNPs, the slight variations in how enzymes work, that for some people, saturated fat in the diet can increase cholesterol levels. And that might be someplace that you want to focus and start looking. Typically, I love whole fat dairy. If you're going to do dairy, I like to get the whole situation. It's really good for your satiety and fat soluble vitamins and things like that. However, if we want to look at cholesterol and see if we can make an impact, doing dairy, but having it be low or non-fat, doing overall reduction in saturated fat for 3 months, getting your numbers rechecked, and see if you fit into that category of people who are sensitive to the amount of saturated fat. Most people are not. I think it's about 30% of the population. So big question. I'm glad that you've been taking care of yourself. And, as you go into this new phase of life, it does require a different focus. And yeah, usually when these health challenges come up for us, what we end up making changes that make us overall healthier in the end. So they hopefully in the end will be a blessing of pushing you to take even better care.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
I also want to add that timing of your food intake might be something you also want to look at in light of our conversation about chrononutrition. And again, I don't know how your rhythm of food intake and, because the metabolism of certain things would, be obviously a bit higher during the first half of the day. And, as you move and progress towards the evening hours, that would be slowing down. So you might want to look at the rhythm and frequency and where your kind of food intake lays in that regard.
Okay, great point. Thank you.
All right. Well, I know we're at the end of our time and a lot of people have to hop off the call. So thank you so much, everyone. We are so happy we can at least initiate the conversation and hopefully for many more to come. And enjoy the rest of your day and hopefully this healthier and more well-rounded mindset for everyone.
Thank you, everyone.